Welcome to episode 31 of the barn door restoration. Last episode, I got the front wheel wells finished off and installed. This episode, I got the front valance built and installed. There's actually a few spot welds I haven't finished off yet. I kind of ran out of time, but it's mostly there. I had planned to do the bulkhead next because I was missing some details, but I actually managed to sort those out, so I decided to do this next. So the front valance basically is the only structure in the front of these. The A-pillars weld on the ends of them. And so they just basically work as a bridge to bridge the A-pillars into the frame rails. And these are only 0.9 millimeter steel, so 20 gauge. I thought they were thicker, but I measured my 64, it was 0.9. And there's some bits of metal, the original on this, that I was able to measure accurately, and it was also 0.9. So quite thin metal for here. So it's just a channel. It has a lip formed on top and bottom for the front skin to weld to. And just has a curve. Now the curve is not just a straight curve, it changes radius as it goes. And then it's got an end section. There's a sharper bend here and the end is flat. And then it has these end pieces which spot weld in, and they have some flanges here that the A-pillar welds to. It holds the A-pillar in place. The brackets that go on the end of the frame, and this one's just basically a C-channel, and it's welded, bead weld up both sides to the valance, and then welds the end of the frames. And they have a bead weld top and bottom. And this one had, I had a section of it here. Oh, here's my original frame. And I was able to look in here, and it had actually 5 spot welds top and bottom. And there's also a weld at the end of the frame to this panel. And this side's a little different because it has a step down, and that's for the steering box frame. So it steps down on that and has an extra piece that goes in. This one welds similar, top and bottom. There's a stitch in the frame, into the frame. But on this side, there's plug welds. So this one had 4 plug welds. And I can see, this is my original frame piece, I can actually see where the plug welds were on this. And actually a little bit of a plug weld there. Now some of them only had 1 plug weld on the bottom, and 2 on the top. I'm not sure why. My 64 has 2 plug welds on the bottom. And I couldn't really tell on the top of my 64. It seems smooth up in there. So this is I think this is basically the same on right up through all the split window buses, except for the hole being oval on these and square on the later ones. But this side had quite a few changes. The bottom, the steering box bracket, bolts on here, and some of these are deeper, and if they went straight across on the bottom, they'd interfere with this bracket, so they stepped them forward. This one was not like that. This one was cut back the whole way, and I was able to tell from some of the pieces I had. What part did I have here? Yeah, this piece here. I was able to tell by looking at this and looking at the other piece of frame here that this one went straight across. Now, I'm not sure where those changes were. I've seen pictures of a lot of them that were straight and a lot of them that were stepped. The years didn't seem to make sense. Of course, this piece can be changed on a lot of them, so it's kind of a little hard to tell if they've been changed or not. On the ends of the frame, on the outside of this, there's another reinforcement plate. That's also 20 gauge steel. And this side, it's a smaller, and it has 1 bulge pressed into it, and it's spot welded in. Now this side has 2 bulges. It's a little wider, so it catches the wider bracket. Now I stamped these bulges in. I got them wider than I had planned, so I think they should be a little narrower. Now they get covered up, so no one will ever see them. But I do believe I have these just a little bit too wide. Also, I'm not 100% sure of the dimensions of this plate. I might be off a few millimeters here. Again, something that you can't really tell. Once it's assembled, you can't tell. And there seem to be a lot of changes in this. Just small changes. I'm assuming as tooling changed through the years, these pieces are kind of moved around a bit. So I had to build all these from scratch. There was nothing left on the original bus that was any good. This is the centerpiece here. You can see one of the holes for that's actually the splash pan or pedal pan comes in. It actually bolts to that hole there. That's one of the changes between this and the later split window buses. The barn doors, this is flat here, and the nuts that weld on, which I forgot to weld on, I'll have to do that after. But the nuts that weld here are just flat, whereas the later ones, I actually step this in like a little pocket on an angle. So yeah, the original one, there wasn't much left. There was a little section of metal that was not rusted. There's a bit of primer there, and a little inside who actually wasn't rusted, so I was able to get the accurate measurement for thickness. But not much left of that. The brackets on the end, this is the original frame rail off this end, and it had a little bit of this bracket was on here. I was able to tell where the spot welds were on that, and I actually cut it back here a bit to see if there's any plug welds. There was not, it was just spot welded. I think some of them had plug welds, but also the thing I should mention, I'd never realized before that the end of these frames are stepped down on the front. And actually I can see it stepped around right there. And it stepped down for the thickness of this metal. Oddly, my 64 is also stepped down. The 64, the front floor actually turns and goes up. So everything after the barn door has a completely flat floor, it comes right out to here. But later ones, they tip and step up in this section. So there was no reason for them to put that dent in the frame, but yeah, so I had to add that little step down in there. I just never realized it was there. So I could also tell a bit of details from my old steering box frame, and I could see where the plug welds were. At the bottom, there's just all that's left is where the plug weld was. So I could see where the line of this metal came and where it was plug welded. And into the frame, I'd also tell how this was welded on because there's a weld there. And then I had this remaining piece, which has the oval hole matched up. And I could see the inner frame and where there was some weld here. And also there's a nut that welds in there. And that's also for the splash pan, bolts up through. So I didn't have much left, but enough to figure it out. Also, on the nose section, this piece right here was still existing. So this little section here with the bottom of the A-pillar. So I was able to see these lips and how this was all put together. Most of the time I spent on this was actually getting accurate measurements and getting drawings. Luckily, my 64 bus had no rust on the front of it. It's all original metal, and there's no collision damage, so it's all correct. So I can measure it, and what I use for reference, I just use the bulkhead. I know the bulkhead, that tube is in the right spot, measured from the rear. It also matches up my 64. And then I was able to measure forward to get points back to that to make sure I was getting correct. And then also measuring the width. And I made a pattern. So this I made off my 64 and fits in here. So I was able to actually cut it and then put it up underneath my 64 and then measure it to the bulkhead and sure I had everything correct. So when I had to bend this, I could get it the exact shape, which was a bit of a pain to do, but this is very important to have it in the correct spot because it controls where your A-pillars are. And if they're not in the right spot, then the door's not going to fit. So once I had good drawings of the parts, it was quite easy to make the pieces. Just being able to print out the flat patterns and then bend stuff up. Now the valance itself, where it's curved, I basically added the two bends, so I had a channel, and then used a stretcher to stretch this lip. And with a pattern, I could match this up to the pattern, so I could just stretch a little and get it to match up. Something about the stretcher, if you're going to use one, you probably want a foot pedal. So I was using it with the handle, and that was just going to be way too much work. So I built a foot pedal, and that was much easier. It's almost no work at all with the foot pedal. So yeah, so just stretch this long till I match the pattern. Now the ends, because there's a sharp bend and these ends are flat, I just bent that in the press. Just took a piece of angle iron and pushed into it with them blocks, so it put that bend. Now I did do extra stretching on this lip before I bent and then after I bent to get the angle I wanted. Because as you stretch the steel, it just kind of bends it around, pushes it out, gets the angle. So that wasn't too hard to do. Once I had the curve and I had to put this lip in it, and I used a tipping die in the bead roller. So tipping die is, you use one die that's sharp, and that pushes against another die to crease the metal and bend it. Now you can use it against a steel die, lower die, but I use a rubber one, and I'll start, so it pushes the metal into the rubber and starts my bend. So you can get this lip on a curve. Now it doesn't bend it the whole 90 in there, it'll only bend it part way. But it gets you your angle, or it gets the line. Then you have to shrink the metal, because as you bring it up, you have too much metal. So shrink it, and that brings it over a bit more. And then just hammer and dolly the rest. So it come out pretty good. So these pieces in here, I basically just bend a channel. And then I made a little die for the press. So what I had a piece of pipe that I just cut a sliver out of, welded to a plate. And then I had another piece with two square tubes that come down each side, and I just pressed them together. So I put it in the press them in. Again, I think I had these a little too wide. I'm not 100% sure of that, but I just feel like they're too wide. So once these were stamped in, then I kind of stretched the metal top and bottom to give it the curve. So I wanted the curve to fit right nice and tight against this, so there wasn't any. So when I clamped it up to weld it, I didn't change the angle of this any. These brackets were pretty simple. I just cut them out, bends. The end brackets are quite a complex little thing. Again, cutting them out. The lips on them that were bent, when I look at my original ones, so the bottom of the right side A-pillar, they look like they were bent by hand. The lips on them have a poor definition. They're not a sharp bend. They're kind of rounded a bit, and they're uneven. So I think they were hand bent when they were new. So these ones look basically the same because I hand bent them. So. And then I used the tipping die to do the top and bottom lips. I've actually got to grind them down a little bit. I made them a little wide, so I have to kind of grind them off some, finish them up. I haven't finished spot welding those on yet. I still have to add some more spot welds. Kind of run out of time to get this video done. So once all the parts were done, I did media blast everything. Because stuff rusts so quickly here, we have high humidity at times. And even new metal will flash rust really quickly. So we really can't leave anything in bare metal. So media blasted it, put a layer of zinc, and started to assemble. So to assemble it, the first thing I did, I just spot welded these plates on here. Because these oval holes for the bumper brackets, or slots, rounded into slots, sorry. Because these slots are exactly the same size, it's just a matter of lining them up, spot welding it on. And then I use clamps to hold it. just to make sure that it didn't flex at all when I spot welded it. Then I took the brackets, set the brackets on, set these in, clamped everything where I wanted it, made sure everything was lined up. The brackets are bead welded. They have a bead weld up both sides of them, and to this valance. So what I did is, when I got everything in place, I tacked those in, pulled it off, put the clamps back on this so it wouldn't straighten, and then I welded those in solid. Then I slid it on again, clamped everything down, made sure it was lined up and straight, and then welded them on the frame. They just get basically a bead of weld across top and bottom. There is 5 spot welds on the end, top and bottom of each frame rail. There is some welds inside. For the bottom of this frame rail, there was a weld inside. There's plug welds to the steering box bracket. And there's also welds up the inside between the frame rail and the inside of the bracket, just above the slot for the bumper bracket. The bottom I'll weld later once I have it on rotisserie. So I welded those in, made this solid. Then I put the end brackets on. And I did those last in case I needed to make any adjustment. So I clamped them up and I measured them back to the bulkhead, measured the width in them, and ensured everything was correct. And it turns out they fit where they're supposed to. But if I was off a little bit, I could adjust these slightly, just to make sure my A-pillar is in the right spot. So those worked out, so I spot welded those on, or started to. So I guess that's about it for this episode. I did drawings for this, uploaded in GrabCAD, and there's a link in the description. So something I should mention, there's a local car show in about a month's time, and I was planning on taking this. Progress-wise, I'm on track. Once the bulkhead was welded in, then everything could be installed on it, and I could drive it on off the trailer and stuff. But I decided not to take it. Couple issues. One, I don't want to get it wet. I don't want rain on it. I also live on a dirt road, so I don't want it to get covered in dust, and I don't want it to get covered in mud. And the chances of one or the other are fairly high. So if I go through the work of getting it all ready to go, there's a fairly good chance that I won't want to take it, just because I don't want to get it wet and dirty. And the second thing, it is quite a bit of work. Take this off the frame jig, install everything in it, and then after, reverse the process, put it back on the frame jig. And then there's also the day of the show, having to trailer this in, unload it somewhere, leave it, come back, get my other bus. That's not, and then the same opposite in the after the show. So it's a lot less stress, worries if I just say no, I'm not going to take it. So I know there's a few people that were probably looking forward to seeing it there. I apologize for that, but anyway, next episode is going to be the bulkhead. I have to remove it from the old nose section and rebuild it and weld it on. Oh, also there is another barn door being restored on YouTube. So it's a 54 single cab. And it's a little newer than this one. There's a few little details that are different. But it's similar condition to this. So I'm looking forward to watching the progress on that. It's always fun. I'll put a link in the description. It's a DMOP garage. It also has some other interesting videos, so it's worth checking out. So, well, thanks for the comments, and thanks for watching.